Evil human experiments that actually happened.
The CIA knew that it was breaking, every
CIA,
moral, ethical,
CIA.
and legal law in the books to do these experiments.
The most embarrassing aspect of the whole story was that
Who
the
are these
final
guys?
results for this cruel test were not even noteworthy.
He says he's not going to go on. Please continue.
He says he doesn't want to go on.
We must continue.
We must continue.
Today, experiments have strict rules to protect people, but that wasn't always the case. In the past, researchers experimented on people without considering the consequences, and the damage often lasted a lifetime.
That's what happened to me when I was in elementary school. I was in elementary school and I went to the doctors for my toe, right? And then for some reason they checked my butthole. So I had someone stick their finger up my butthole. I had a prostate exam at my elementary school age. I don't know why that happened. I can't recall.
In this video, we'll explore evil human experiments that actually happened, starting with the unsettling cases and ending with the most horrifying. So it is the new year, guys, and I want to encourage you guys to be the best version of yourselves that you can be. And
that's not even me joking around. It's a real story.
And I promise to do my best to make the best videos I possibly can for you. I'm Visual Venture, and you are awesome. MK Ultra. For years, the MK Ultra experiment sounded like a made-up story. Many believed it was simply too cruel to be real. But in 1973, the truth came out. Declassified CIA files confirmed that MK Ultra actually happened, and it involved illegal human experiments.
It was the most secret
What year is
program
this?
ever conducted by the CIA in the United States.
But the worst part was not how extreme the experiments were. It was that people were forced to take part in it. MK Ultra officially began in 1953. At that time, the CIA believed other countries were developing brainwashing and mind control techniques. But there was no evidence to confirm this. But the agency didn't want to fall behind, so they launched MK Ultra. The goal was clear: find ways to erase the memory and then control the mind.
Can we actually control?
Oh my god, like in Men in Black, the little pen, and you forget everything.
Personality? Can we make them behave in certain ways? Make them do something?
MK Ultra quickly grew into a massive operation. It included more than 150 separate projects. These projects took place in universities, hospitals, and even in public. And some of the methods were so inappropriate that keeping this a secret became necessary.
Wait, like what do you mean inappropriate? Like they flash their penis in front of them and they I'll stop.
The CIA knew that it was breaking, every moral, ethical, and legal law in the books to do these experiments.
One of the CIA's main tools was mind-altering drugs. Researchers wanted to know whether dosing people made them easier to control.
Even people in the public were given drugs without their awareness or consent, and
were they spreading it through the air?
But secretly dosing people sometimes ended in disaster. Frank Olson's story is a perfect example. Olson was a scientist working with US intelligence. In 1953, he attended a meeting with colleagues. During that meeting, the CIA spiked Olson's drink with a truth serum. He had no idea. Agents stood nearby and watched how it affected him. When the substance took effect, Olson became emotionally unstable. A witness described him as disoriented. The effect lasted for days. 1 week later, Olson was staying at a hotel. He suddenly woke up in the middle of the night and ran around the room in his underwear.
No, they just gave him some fucking drugs,
Then
bro.
he fell from
Not even
a
truth
hotel
serum.
window. He didn't survive. But Olson wasn't the only victim of MK Ultra. Many MK Ultra experiments took place in hospitals and psych wards.
However, some of the most damaging experiments occurred at the Allen Memorial Institute in Montreal, Canada.
The patients were
my
already
country?
vulnerable. Instead of receiving
my
proper
country?
care, they were treated like
This
guinea
shit's happening?
pigs. MK Ultra doctors wanted to learn how to erase memories.
And he thought that if you could bring a person back down to a blank slate, remove all the environmental inputs that have been put into them, and then you can build them back up in your image into whatever you want them to be.
The methods used were too extreme for me to describe. Many patients didn't understand what was happening. That made it nearly impossible for them to refuse.
he wasn't the
By the time
pioneer?
patients
Guys, I would never commit any harm towards anybody and would never drug anybody. Twitch. Thank you. Unless they had like $1 billion and they could give it to me, but that's just like you understand, right?
were discharged.
My
they were
tracking is so
seriously
fucked right
affected.
now. What the
He
fuck
never
is
came
going
out
on?
the same. He had a blank look in his eye. He
I would
didn't
never do
know
anything.
who we were. He didn't
I'm an
know
innocent
we were
man.
his daughters.
MK Ultra
Innocent, I
experiments
tell
also
you.
took place in prisons. Inmates were
Okay,
given
something's wrong
substances,
right
and the
here. Hold
reactions
up.
were
I'm
closely
gonna clean the
monitored.
camera. Maybe
the
if I
program
clean the
continued
camera.
for nearly 10 years, and so many of the things they did were illegal.
They were also experimenting with aerosol LSD.
How you doing,
can we
Gibo?
disperse it into a crowd? Can we disperse it over a city? What does it do in water supplies? And just some insane stuff.
In 1963, the CIA officially ended MK Ultra. This was the explanation recorded inside the CIA director's office.
His office reported, the concepts involved in manipulating human behavior are found by many people, both within and outside the agency, to be
Except for your next
distasteful
stream, because I
and
get
unethical.
6'9".
After
Oh
the
my
program
god.
ended, the CIA
I'm never streaming ever again. There'll be no more streams.
director ordered
Why the
most
fuck is my
MK
model
Ultra
so
files
laggy?
destroyed. The goal was to keep the experiments hidden, but that plan failed. A few years after it ended, a reporter found out about the program and blew the whistle.
In 1974, Seymour Hersh
getting
exposed
mad.
the MK Ultra
I'm getting
program
pretty
when he wrote
mad.
about it for the New
It's
York
pissing me
Times.
The
off.
article caused public outrage. Soon after, Congress launched an investigation.
No.
The CIA was forced
Yeah, what
to
a
admit the
tragedy.
truth.
During those hearings, the CIA finally admitted that this program existed. They admitted that it was probably not
He has
the
the
right thing to
funnier
do,
number.
but they feigned innocence.
Funnier
But
one.
then most of the records were destroyed. That meant
My
the full
tracking is
scope of
so
MK
bad
Ultra
right now.
would never be known, and victims were left without justice. Up next is an experiment that intentionally
going on?
instilled fear in people. The Landis facial expression experiment. In 1924, psychologist Carney Landis began a study on human reactions. He wanted to know if everyone makes the same face when they feel the same emotion, like fear, disgust.
Why is my
and so on.
tracking
I mean,
so
it was a reasonable
ass?
question, but in trying to find the answer, Landis created one of the most horrifying experiments ever.
I'm
and
so
those who suffered most were
confused,
his test
man.
subjects. Landis recruited young college
The
students for the
Milgram? What
study.
the hell is the Milgram experiment? I don't know
On
what
paper,
that
the
is.
plan was simple. He was going to trigger
no idea.
emotions like disgust and joy and capture them on camera.
So he needs to get you to feel emotions to get a picture of your face.
The first thing he did was paint
No, not
thick
yet.
black
He's
lines
still finding
across
one.
each volunteer's face. He said the markings would help track facial expressions in photos. Next, he mounted
found
a
Keith's
camera
job, bro.
on the wall. It was positioned to capture everything. At this point, it still looked like a normal psychology study, but things were about to get dark. Landis wanted to see the face people made when they felt uncomfortable. To
It doesn't
trigger that
have to be a
reaction,
horror
he showed
game, Keith. It could be
volunteers a
whatever,
set of
man.
unsettling
If it's
images.
fun, it's fun.
Then he shows you
I just need good
medical
stream
photos
content. That's
of
why I do
people
horror.
with horrendous skin conditions.
The volunteers were clearly distressed, and the camera recorded every reaction. Next, Landis moved on to
Reaction?
fear.
Then he goes behind a curtain and sets off a firecracker to capture on film the exact moment of your fright.
He didn't just use
I have to have something running in
firecrackers.
the
Landis
background.
also fired a weapon close to the volunteers. Once again, his goal was to capture at the exact moment of their fright. Then the experiment escalated. Landis told the volunteers to close their eyes and stick their hands into a metal
I don't know
bucket.
why it's
Inside, they felt
running
something
like shit.
slimy. The bucket was full of live frogs, kicking and squirming. Landis recorded their expressions, but he wasn't finished. He instructed them to search the
guys know
bottom
the-
of the bucket for an
You guys
object.
know the water's turning the frogs gay.
So after searching for through all these frogs for some time, finally the participant found their surprise.
Their hands touched a live electrical coil. An electrical shock ripped through their bodies.
So the participants were also getting shocked by that time, and that time they were facial expressions were also recorded.
Still, Landis wasn't satisfied. He wanted stronger reactions. Landis brought out a small mouse. It was live.
He wanted like the YouTuber eyeball pop out. Well, bro, I should start doing that. I should on my thumbnails. I should start like I put like big eyeballs popping up like oh.
Then he ordered each volunteer to end the mouse.
And if they didn't, he would do it for them in front of them while they watched.
Almost everyone asked Landis if he was joking. They quickly realized he wasn't. Landis wanted to take a photo of their faces as they carried out the act. Many volunteers refused at first, but Landis pressured them. One by one, most of them gave in. About 1/3 refused to do it themselves, but Landis didn't let them off the hook. Landis did it himself. He made them watch. The camera clicked again and again.
Whoa.
The experiment was over. Now it was time to assess the results. After triggering all of these emotions, Landis reviewed the photos, and he found showed no clear pattern. There was no typical facial expression for any emotion. Fear, disgust, and shock looked different from person to person. In fact, smiling was the most common reaction even during unpleasant experiences. When Landis published his findings, many people criticized how the volunteers were treated. The part involving the mouse caused the most outrage. That's why today, the Landis facial expression experiment is remembered for its cruelty, not its science. Up next is an experiment that had lasting consequences on a child. The little Albert.
Why are we experimenting on a child, bro?
Experiment.
Let the kid play Fortnite in peace, bro.
Fear is a survival tool.
Maybe Fortnite is not that bad, you know?
This when danger is near. But for decades, psychologists argued about where fear comes from. Are we born with it, or does the world teach us what to fear? In 1920, two researchers decided to stop debating and find out for themselves. They wanted to train someone to fear something specific, even if that thing was harmless. Before the experiment could begin, they ran into a major issue. They couldn't use adults. Adults already have memories and life experiences, so they know what's scary and what isn't. The researchers needed someone with no sense of what could be scary. Ideally, they needed a baby.
So they just traumatized a child.
Researchers eventually found a baby in the hospital where they worked.
Oh, guys, I don't really know what's a common scary thing. Let's go traumatize a child.
His mother was a nurse at the same hospital. The baby's real name was never recorded. In the study, he was called Albert B. Albert was only 9 months old. The researchers planned to teach him fear. To do this, they used a method called classical conditioning. Here's the concept. If you pair something harmless with something frightening, the brain may link the two. If you repeat that pairing enough times, the brain learns a new rule. This object means danger. The research
that's called trauma. 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 I think I spelled that right.
To test this idea on little Albert. They began by showing him a white lab rat. Albert showed no fear. He tried to touch the rat. Next, they showed him a rabbit, a dog, and a monkey. None of the animals frightened him.
First, as you see here, the investigators demonstrated that prior to conditioning, little Albert had no fears of any animals.
At that point, the scientists needed a way to trigger fear. They struck a steel bar using a hammer. The noise startled Albert and he burst into tears. Now they knew what made him scared. The researchers showed Albert the rat again. He smiled and reached for it just like before. At that exact moment, they made the loud noise again.
In the conditioning phase of the study, which was not filmed, the investigators struck a steel bar.
Dude, he could have been the next like the animal king, bro. To communicate to every animal.
Albert heard the noise and cried. To strengthen the connection, they repeated the process. After several rounds, the scientists finally got the result they wanted. Albert didn't need to hear the noise anymore. Seeing the rat alone made him cry.
The investigators believed that the child's reaction during this trial demonstrated his newly acquired fear of white rat.
They successfully taught a baby to fear something specific, but the experiment wasn't over yet. Researchers wanted to see if Albert's fear would transfer to similar objects, so they placed a rabbit in front of Albert. It was white and furry, just like the rat. Albert cried. Next, they brought in a dog and a monkey. He cried again. It seemed Albert was scared of anything soft, white, or furry. They even showed him a Santa Claus beard, and he burst into tears. The researchers planned to remove the fear later, but they never got the chance. Albert's mother suddenly left the hospital with her child. Maybe she realized something was wrong. No one knows for sure. What we do know is this: Albert never received treatment to reverse the fear. For decades, Albert's identity remained a mystery. Researchers only knew he was born around 1919.
Did we find out who he was eventually?
In 2014, investigators believed they finally identified him. They concluded that he was a man named Albert Barger. They wanted to interview him, but they couldn't. Albert already passed away at the age of 87. Instead, they spoke with a
ever since I don't know, I was scared of furry things. Ever since I was a youngin', I don't know why.
They described Albert as gentle and calm, but there was something strange about him. Albert couldn't stand being around animals. It was so bad that family members had to keep their dogs in a separate room.
Wow!
If Albert Barger was really little Albert, it's possible that the fear from the experiment never faded. The little Albert experiment showed that fear can be learned.
That's why I'm so scared of bees.
Classical conditioning. But the fact that they used the baby was just wrong. This next case answered the question: how easily can you make a good person do bad things? the Milgram shock experiment.
Milgram
Most
shock
people believe
experiment.
they are good. In the early
From
1960s,
conditioning is
psychologist
crazy.
Stanley Milgram decided to test that belief.
Stanley Milgram was interested in the psychology of obedience.
Milgram designed an experiment to answer one dark question. Can a good person be pressured into doing something evil simply because their leader or boss
my boy
orders them
Milgram's in
to?
this shit?
Milgram's question was inspired by the events of World War II. After the war, many people involved in horrific crimes were put on trial. Almost all of them gave the same excuse. They were just following orders. As a psychologist, Milgram found this blind obedience deeply troubling. He wanted to know if ordinary Americans could also be pressured to hurt others.
He decided to see how subjects would react when a researcher pushed them to do things that went against their morals.
The first step was selecting volunteers for his experiment. He put out
Like a
an ad
police
offering
officer.
$4 for 1 hour of their time. But Milgram turned away anyone with a violent history or criminal record. He wanted everyday people who knew right from wrong. Once the volunteers were selected, the experiment began. Milgram conducted the study at Yale University, but he lied to the volunteers about the purpose of the experiment.
Volunteers were told they were taking part in scientific research to improve memory.
Each volunteer sat at a desk with a machine in front of them. That machine delivers a shock. Wires connected the machine to a chair in the next room. Each volunteer watched as another man was strapped into the chair. Electrodes were attached to his body. Then
That's
a
fucking
barrier was placed
scary.
between them. From that moment
That
on,
is your next in line.
the
Holy.
volunteer could not see the person in the electric chair. The instructions were straightforward. The volunteer would ask a question. The man in the chair would answer. If the answer was wrong, the volunteer pressed a switch and delivered an electric shock.
You're
At
going to
least
read
this
these
guy
words out
traumatized
and see
adults.
if he can remember 'em.
Yeah.
And if he gets it wrong, you hit this button and deliver a shock.
But the shocks weren't all the same.
He was told to increase the voltage with each wrong answer.
That was the task. Press a button and shock another person for
Justice
making
for
a
my
mistake.
boy
Milgram
Albert.
wanted to see how far volunteers would go before they
I asked
refused.
Leviathan if she knew any authors who wrote the dinosaur novels. She said Triceratops.
Cloud. Horse. Rock.
Thank you for the first time,
house.
chat.
Answer. Wrong.
Each shock triggered a reaction from the man in the chair.
Answer. Wrong.
Look how big the room is. I said past
150 volts.
However, there was one more thing the volunteer didn't know. The man in the chair was an actor. He wasn't actually being shocked. His reactions were fake. As the experiment continued, the actor yelled to stop.
Experiment, that's all. Get me out of here. Get me out of here, please. I refuse to go on. Let me out.
At this point, the volunteers
Yes.
hesitated.
He says he's not going to go on. Please continue.
He says he doesn't want to go on.
We must continue.
But the researchers insisted they continue.
Oh, wow.
The experiment requires you continue, teacher. Please continue.
And most volunteers did. They felt they were doing something wrong, but they kept pushing the button.
So the guy keeps getting it wrong, keeps getting it wrong. Around 250 volts, he's screaming.
Some volunteers strongly protested.
I'm not going to kill that man there. I mean, who's going to take the responsibility if anything happens to that gentleman? I'm responsible for anything that happens here. Continue, please.
Eventually,
Just
the man in the
leave!
room went
Just
silent.
leave!
I think something's happened to that fellow in there. I don't get no answer.
At that point, the experiment ended. Milgram published the results in 1963.
2/3 of volunteers were prepared to administer a potentially fatal
Yes, I've
electric
played
shock
short
when
creepy
encouraged to
pastas,
do
but I
so.
don't care what he
In
wants to do.
total,
Yes, Thunderbolt.
65% of volunteers went all the way to the maximum
450 volts.
450 volts. That meant that if the shocks were real, they would have ended the person in the chair. Milgram's experiment proved something disturbing. People don't need to be evil to do harm. Sometimes they just have to be told to do it.
Decent American citizens were as capable of committing acts against their conscience as the Germans had been under the Nazis.
This next case shows how you
Wow.
can cause permanent damage to someone by using only words. The Monster Study. What could make an experiment so disturbing that people called it the Monster Study? The study was created by Wendell
Monster
Johnson. He was a
Study.
respected professor at the University of Iowa.
What's so
Despite his
scary about
success, he
this?
lived with a deep personal struggle. Johnson stuttered a lot. Stuttering is a speech impediment that disrupts the normal flow of
I
speech.
also
Back
stutter a
in the
lot.
1930s, doctors believed stuttering was caused by a biological defect. In other words, stutterers were simply born that way. But
Do I got a defect?
Johnson had a different theory based on his personal experience.
Apparently, he had spoken normally his whole life until the age of about 5 or 6, when a teacher told his parents that he was starting to exhibit a bit of a stutter.
That comment from his teacher was a trigger. Johnson became anxious about speaking. Over time, he actually developed a stutter.
Wow!
Looking back, he concluded that it was a self-fulfilling prophecy. Had he not been so worried about not developing a stutter and so obsessed over his speech, he never would have become a stutterer.
Johnson wanted to prove that stuttering was caused by negative feedback, not biology. To do this, he needed kids he could...
When did you play? Because multiple stories, it got updated. The stories in that game aren't very good.
Study without interference. In
There's one where you just walk up a staircase and nothing happens.
Johnson walked into an orphanage and told the staff a lie. He said he wanted to give the children speech therapy. The staff agreed, thinking Johnson was there to help. Johnson ran the study with his graduate student, Mary Tudor. Together, they selected 22 kids. Some were stutterers, others were not. The researchers divided them into 4 groups. The first group was made up of kids who already stuttered. The goal was to help them feel calm so that their stuttering stopped. So the researchers praised them all the time. Everyone in the second group was also a stutterer.
Did it work?
In this case, the researchers wanted them to feel anxious, so their stutter would worsen.
they forced
Therefore,
that.
they were criticized constantly. The third group was full of children.
We gotta stop experimenting with children, bro. They're way too easily influenced.
Spoke normally. They were praised.
And that's for
and
life.
encouraged
That's
to
for
keep
life,
speaking
bro.
Just the way they were. Then there was the final group. These children spoke perfectly
they were crazy.
before the study, but the researchers wanted to make them start stuttering. To achieve that, they were constantly criticized. They were accused of stuttering even when their words were clear.
They were told, you must try to stop yourself immediately. Use your willpower. Do anything to keep from stuttering. Don't ever speak unless you can do it right.
After that, the researchers recorded what happened to each group. The 2 groups that received negative feedback were deeply affected. The children who already stuttered became more anxious, and just like Johnson predicted, their stuttering got worse. But what about those the researchers were trying to turn into stutterers? Well, that didn't work. The criticism did not make them suddenly start stuttering. However, it shattered their self-confidence.
Every child in this group began to struggle in school. Some of them refused to talk, even to their friends.
One was so distressed that
guys, okay, we gotta do this experiment thing. Who is the most influential people that we can choose? Oh, dude, I know a perfect spot. Let's go to the nearby elementary school. Yeah!
He ran away from the orphanage. This clip sums it up well.
The children who were given negative feedback
Let's go give trauma to those children. Did I get a round of applause for my research?
Became more withdrawn, self-conscious, and frustrated, whether or not they actually had a stutter to begin with.
When Johnson shared the results with his colleagues, they were horrified. They warned him that publishing the study could destroy his career. According to reports, they were the ones who nicknamed it the monster study. Johnson never published the study. He hid the documents and hoped his actions would stay buried.
The children also weren't debriefed after the project was over, and there was no real follow-up on how they may have been affected by the study long term.
When Johnson passed away, he was praised as a respected professor. At that point, no one knew about the orphans, but that changed in 2001. A reporter uncovered records of the monster experiment. When the story became public,
because I got a good traumatic background story.
People were outraged. Some of the kids from the experiment were still alive. They were now in their 80s. Most claimed they struggled with anxiety and shame. The survivors sued the state of Iowa, which is where the study took place. In 2007, the state paid almost $1 million in compensation. There was no debate.
I've never seen G at the end of a
experiment.
They're like 925 grand.
Should have never happened. This next experiment got so destructive it had to be stopped early. The Stanford prison experiment. This experiment was designed to create an atmosphere of oppression. The man behind it was psychologist Philip Zimbardo. For years,
these psychologists are fucking crazy.
Zimbardo studied how people behave in prisons, the military, and even offices. In each place, he noticed the same pattern. People in power often treated others badly. Over time, Zimbardo formed a theory. People didn't commit cruel acts because they were born evil. They did them because the situation allowed it. Simply put, power can bring out the worst in people, but it was only a theory. To test it, he needed to
That's why
create
people are pedophiles.
environment where power could be abused. That idea became the Stanford Prison Experiment. Zimbardo built a makeshift prison in the basement of a college building. Cameras were installed to record everything that happened. He added cells, a prison yard, and a guard station. The goal was to make the prison feel real enough to shape behavior. Next, he selected 24 college students to take part in the 2-week experiment. Zimbardo split them up into 2 groups. One group became guards, the other became prisoners. To help the guards feel powerful, Zimbardo gave them whistles, batons, and mirrored sunglasses. The sunglasses hid the guards' eyes, making it easier to act without empathy. Zimbardo never told the guards to be cruel or misuse their power. He simply gave them authority and watched what happened. The prisoners, on the other hand, were stripped of anything personal. They wore identical clothing that erased their individuality.
That seems
their names
kind
were
of
replaced
crazy.
with ID numbers.
So that they would begin to think of themselves anonymously as numbers and no longer as people with names and identities.
From the start, the imbalance was clear. On the first day, the guards were polite and careful. They still saw the prisoners as fellow students.
This is unbelievable. They took my clothes. Hands off the door.
Soon, the mood began to shift.
Oh.
On day 2, there was a very sharp
Is this why cops are all evil? Not all of them, but you know.
and the whole nature of what was happening in that prison.
The guards started raising their voices. Guards punished prisoners for minor mistakes. Their authority was settling in.
The guards then began to escalate their use of power. Some of them had prisoners clean out toilet bowls with their bare hands.
If a prisoner resisted, they were locked in a small closet. This was their version of solitary confinement. Within the first 4 days, 3 prisoners were so affected that they were released. By the 5th day, the remaining prisoners looked exhausted. When they lined up for inspection, they seemed scared.
You see how he did that, boy? Yes, sir, Mr. Craig.
The guards acted differently too. They were now tyrannical. It seemed like they forgot that they were just students in an experiment. The situation was out of control. It was just a matter of time before someone got hurt.
And at that point, we said, enough, we have to end this.
The experiment was scheduled to last 14 days, but Zimbardo shut it down on the 6th day. In 1972,
6 days before people got overtaken by power.
Zimbardo
Holy
talked about
shit.
his experiment at conferences. He also released a film showing real footage of what happened. Public reaction was intense. Some people refused to believe the results. They argued that Zimbardo unknowingly selected people who were predisposed to authoritarianism. But others believed the experiment proved Zimbardo's theory. Normal people can change when placed into powerful or powerless roles. Decades later, the Stanford Prison Experiment is still debated. The consequences of this next experiment
No, 6 days and they were already deep in power.
affected
Hold,
thousands of people and lasted for decades. Project
This is why World Wars happened, yeah.
Project 4.1 was
Are you excited
officially
for
described
all of us to be drafted?
as a medical study.
I can't wait to be
Scientists wanted
drafted,
to understand
guys.
how radiation
It's gonna be
affects
so
the human
fire.
body, but this experiment was never planned in advance. It began because of a disaster. In the early 1940s, the US set out to build the most powerful
Yeah. What would be fire? What would be a fire idea?
weapon ever created, a nuclear bomb. But there was only one way to know if they were on the right track. They needed to test the nukes they were making. Testing meant detonation. The military needed a remote location to blow stuff up without drawing
So
attention.
entire
They
island
chose
is
the
gone.
Marshall Islands in the Pacific Ocean.
The Marshall Islands is
What if
mostly
there's
made up of
people in
atolls,
there?
which are ring-shaped coral reefs with a lagoon in the middle.
But those islands weren't empty. People lived there.
What?
Nuclear testing in that region put the locals at risk. But the military moved forward anyway.
Between 1946 and 1958, the US carried out a series of nuclear
Immediate conclusion: the argument was population sample was already biased. You know who aren't biased?
tests, detonating 67 giant bombs in the Marshall Islands.
The tests continued for years. The explosions grew more powerful. It was just a matter of
Children!
On March 1st, 1954, the military carried out another test.
The shockwave visibly roared across the ocean and hit the camera ship miles away.
But scientists miscalculated the strength of the blast. It was more than twice as powerful as predicted. A cloud of radioactive debris shot into the sky, and it drifted toward the nearby islands.
And then there was the wind. It blew in a different direction than what the scientists expected, and carried nuclear fallout to nearby populated islands.
On the ground,
like, why we even need nukes, guys? Like I feel like the only reason why we would ever use a nuke if an alien came out with a fucking spaceship in the sky and we all saw it. That's the only time we should use a nuke.
Locals noticed something falling from the sky. It looked like powder.
My cousin Erosi.
Or like if gods, or if like a fucking kaiju came out of the
on top
water.
of a tree whenever the powder fell.
The Kraken
Kids
appeared.
played in the powder, adults touched it, everyone breathed it in. It got on everything, clothing, food, and even toys that the kids played with. The exposure continued for days. They had no idea that it was toxic. After the fallout, the researchers faced a choice. They could warn the locals and evacuate them, or they could treat it as a research opportunity. Behind closed doors, military leaders and scientists made their decision. Instead of evacuating the locals, they decided to use them as test subjects. They called it Project 4.1. The US knew the danger that the contamination posed, but didn't share that information with the locals. As health problems began to appear, medical teams arrived on the islands. They claimed they were there to help, and they did provide some medical care, but in reality, they were mostly collecting data.
And after testing nuclear weapons on their islands, the US studied the Marshallese people without their consent.
The experiment continued for years. Findings from Project 4.1 were published in US medical journals. The health effects were studied, documented, and shared. Eventually, the Marshallese became their own nation.
Oh, isn't this?
The Marshall Islands gained its independence from the United States in 1979.
By then, many locals already understood they were
I'm really bad with history, chat.
by the
That's
testing.
my
In
least
the
favorite
1990s,
class.
newly declassified documents revealed more details about Project 4.1. Finally, the world realized how the victims were treated as test subjects. The project was condemned worldwide. Some even believed the radiation exposure wasn't accidental and that it was premeditated. Sadly, decades later, many Marshallese people are still living with the effects of the blast.
They call me
taught us
Mr.
a lesson through
Intelligent.
these experiments. When we treat people like test subjects, we lose our humanity. My
We
friends,
lose our
progress
humanity.
should never come at the cost of innocent people's lives. So whatever you're building, make sure you're not destroying someone else.
Yes.
Visual venture.
Visual venture.
Wait,
W
before you
video.
guys go,
Oh,
I
you said
have a
wait.
video where I talk about